Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we've got something quite interesting to take a look at. So, recently, as I've been kind of looking around on Walmart's website, just basically searching for, different Rebirth figures, I've noticed a few really cheap D-Rex figures popping up, and I thought, well, that's weird. Why are they so cheap? They're usually in like the $20 range, $30 range, somewhere in that area, and you can find a few even cheaper than that, which is exactly what I have here, but I was really interested as to why they were so cheap, so I placed an order for one. In the meantime, Collect Jurassic actually had posted that basically they were knockoff D-Rex figures that were being sold on Walmart's website by third-party sellers, and that kind of made me want it even more because it's, something that's quite unique and strange, and I do occasionally, when it comes to the Mattel bootlegs and stuff, do review them here on the channel, so I was actually interested in seeing this one once it arrived, and it has now arrived, clearly, and I will say it's probably one of the ugliest bootleg figures I have ever seen. So, in a way, this is an attempt to kind of show this off to you guys, so that if it's something you're interested in, you can search one out if you really want. Also, it's so that you don't get tricked into buying one thinking it's going to be the incredible Mattel version, because it is definitely not that. So, starting up here at the head sculpt of the D-Rex, you can see again they've got basically the general head shape and everything down, but obviously the fine detail is severely lacking, as is the paintwork. We basically have like a yellowish brown for a large amount of the body color, a white for the lower jaw down into the chest and in the hands, and then you have a darker brown that moves over the top of the figure and also kind of is dry brushed out. Now, this looks to me like it would just be a straight-up Mattel bootleg, because they've even taken the pose and everything from the standard D-Rex from Mattel. However, the fine detail is clearly not there, so it almost looks like somebody took the Mattel version and then based their version off of that and then sculpted it out of, like, clay or something and gave it just the absolute most generic detail ever. That's just kind of what it looks like. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what has happened here. There's a good chance that maybe they, in traditional bootleg fashion, took the figure, kind of scanned it, and then redid some of the detail in a really cheap way, but I'm not so sure that that's the route they took. However, again, I don't sculpt my own figures, so who knows. But you can see the eye is painted with a black, and then there is a red spot there on the inside of the eye. The teeth are all big and clunky and ugly looking. They are painted very sloppily with a white as you move around. We can see the tongue on the inside of the mouth, and that is painted with a very dark, almost like a dark red or dark reddish brown sort of a tone. More of like, it's like a dark reddish brown. You can see it on the inside of the mouth and the upper side as well. No real detail inside the mouth at all, honestly. And you can see the teeth on the lower jaw haven't been given any alternate color outside of this super bright and kind of glossy white that they've applied to the lower jaw that again moves down into the chest. And you can see as you move through the detail, like I said, super lacking, and this really does look to me to be just like a hand sculpted figure. Again, I don't know exactly out of what, but it looks like they basically just sculpted the overall appearance of the D-Rex that Mattel had created, and then they basically just applied some super generic kind of, I don't even know if you would call those creases, just some lines here and there as you move through. As you lead back up, the detail on the side of the figure does look a little bit better, but not by a whole lot. But at least you can see like some areas of like muscle definition and stuff. And again, some slightly more impressive fine detail, but still as a whole, really quite unimpressive. You do have this brown that's dry brushed through a lot of the body, and you can see we transition to that brown as we move down into the hand or foot or whatever this is technically for the D-Rex. No paintwork for the nails, but they are sculpted out. You can see again, same deal for the smaller kind of T-Rex hands. No paintwork for the nails, but they are sculpted out. We do have the figure again in exactly the same pose as your standard Mattel version. As you can see again, the limb right here is kind of up in the air and facing in like it tries to grab, just like the Mattel version does. You've got kind of like a really bumpy texturing to the top of the head as you move along where those browns have been applied, and that as well again looks super awkward and kind of cheap looking, but interesting nonetheless. As you move back, we can very clearly see the rear leg is taking a pretty far step forward compared to what we see on the opposing side, which again I also believe is quite Mattel-like as far as the pose goes. And then you lead out into the tail, and again, at this point of the body, you really only have the yellow and then the brown that's been dry brushed over. Again, you can see how the tail curves down and then curves up out there toward the tip. As you turn it over here, you can see that there's even like a little chip of the paint taken out of the tail. It's just such an overall super cheap figure that we do actually have the claws painted on the rear feet, which is nice, but it's definitely not even of the quality of your standard Mattel bootlegs that I review on the channel. There is no articulation at all. It is just a completely stagnant figure. So kind of like a model-like version, I guess, of the D-Rex, but it's not really high quality. So even if it is model-like, and some people might prefer that, the overall texturing and everything just looks so cheap, it still looks really bad. You maybe could bring out some better visuals for the figure if you repainted it and then also re-sculpted the teeth entirely, but I don't think it's going to look that great either way. For a size, you're looking at just shy of about 8 inches or around 20 centimeters, and then for a height, about 4 3/4 inches or around 12 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day human being next to our very small D-Rex. And you can see when it comes to the size of this one, obviously it's not the smallest we have out there, as we have like the Pop Funko as well as the Captives versions, which would be a little bit smaller and also a lot better looking. But when it comes to a size compared to what the standard Mattel version looks like, it's a whole lot smaller. And to show you that, here is the incredible Mattel version. And as you can see again, I absolutely think that this is just a case of whoever sculpted out this D-Rex sculpted it out to look like the Mattel version, because they didn't really have any other actual source material for it since it's so new. But I don't think it's an actual bootleg of the Mattel version, even though, again, the pose and everything is so similar. When you actually look at the two together, you can see the detail and everything is just so far off. Like, if it actually was a straight-up bootleg of the Mattel version, I feel like you would have way better fine detail. It would also look a lot more similar. The only thing that's really similar between the two is the fact that they stole the paint scheme completely, but also the positioning of the limbs. That's really about it. Even the head is facing a different direction. And obviously we know, looking at the two when you're up close, that it's very different as far as the actual texturing and everything goes. So if they were just straight up bootlegging the Mattel version, first of all, that's impressive speed considering the Mattel version has only recently released, but also, I feel like there would be a lot more similarities between the two and a lot higher quality when it comes to the actual skin texture. So I don't know that I would really say this is a straight up bootleg. I would say it's more of like a knockoff, because it's not like they took the Mattel figure and transformed it into this one. They basically just copied Mattel's homework here. That's how I feel as far as this figure goes. So I would say it's like a knockoff because it's very heavily based on the Mattel version, and that's definitely where they got their overall design from. And the fact that they completely stole the color scheme, even though it's not quite the same tones of color. They stole the pose. Like, very clearly a knockoff of the Mattel version, but not a straight-up bootleg. It is also super cheap and not very good looking. It's like the fine detail is rough on the figure because there's not really a whole lot to it. It looks like something that, like, you know, some young kid that's just getting into sculpting had created. And if that were the case, I'd say, okay, they might have did a pretty good job as far as being, like, you know, one of their earliest sculpts kind of dedicated to the Mattel version. But obviously this is something that is actually being created by third-party sellers in China and, you know, released and actually sold by them by numerous different sellers, because there are many different listings for this figure on Walmart's website. So that makes the entire figure, again, kind of strange, very cheap, and really quite ugly, especially when you have the masterpiece that is the Mattel version. Definitely don't go with this unless you're just looking for something very different in your collection. If you want something that, you know, isn't the norm and may not always be there, because I can't see the demand for this one staying strong, you know, maybe you might want to pick it up. I was actually hoping for something a little bit better than what we got. I kind of was hoping that maybe it would have like articulation and would be just like a cheap, smaller plastic version of the D-Rex, but obviously it is definitely not that. It's somehow even a lot cheaper than I was expecting it to be. But if you are for some reason interested, I will include a link in the description to a listing that I can find on Walmart. The one that I purchased is no longer on there, but I actually did see a listing that actually is showing the picture of this figure, because a lot of them just show the Mattel D-Rex. So I will grab the listing that again does actually show this figure and include it in the description if you want to add it to your collection. Otherwise, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.